Okay, there we go. Good morning, everybody. I'm here with Bruce Rawles, and we are reading Absence from Felicity. Larry is noticing that there's no sound in the room. Hopefully that works now. Um, we're reading Absence from Felicity, the story of
Okay,
the
there we
scribing of A
go.
Course in Miracles with Helen Schuckman. And it's a book by Ken Wapnick. And I've heard I heard another crazy thing the other day, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. About some perception that people had from reading Absence from Felicity, that Helen completely rejected Jesus and had nothing, was not interested in what he had to say at all, which just really cracked me up. That how could you ever have because I think was Keith Kavanaugh was saying that Helen had Jesus in her. She recognized Jesus, and she was very connected with Jesus. So and someone on one of his things said, "Oh, I didn't think Helen cared about Jesus at all," which really kind of shocked me, since it seemed to me like he's pretty much her best friend here. Um,
I try to remember that from the Course's perspective, Jesus, Holy Spirit, our inner kindness teacher, as Ken Wapnick says, any ego-free presence in our mind is really just a symbol for what our real identity is that transcends words. And we all have um, that thought system in our mind. And we all have the ego thought system, which attempts to fight against the sanity with its insanity. And that's that's just a kind of a given that from the Course's perspective, we have a decision-making mind, the ego, and the Holy Spirit, and those are the three parts of our mind. And we're using the decision maker to choose between the ego and the Holy Spirit at every moment. And that's what makes us all the same. And so we're just like Helen in that we have enormous resistance to um, the Holy Spirit's message, which is really what the Course is all about, is listening to that and then eventually abandoning the ego altogether. So we all have those two thought systems, and the decision-making mind that is basically either accepting the ego's propaganda and bald-faced lies from the perspective of truth that are completely forgivable, or the real alternative. And so in that sense, we're none of us are different from each other um, in that very crucial, important regard. And so Helen was no different from you or I or anyone listening to this or anyone reading the Course
yeah,
or not reading the
exactly.
Course.
Yeah, whoever it is, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I saw that this morning, looking at today's lesson, and I do the lesson with a group of people in the morning,
Uh-huh.
and just looking at my own resistance to believing that I am, that I'm love. Love made me loving.
Right.
Kindness made me kind. Those beliefs about ourselves are so persistent that you really have to reprogram your thinking to even be able to open up to the possibility that that's true. And I think Helen didn't have a very good opinion of herself. She didn't see herself as loving and kind, but she knew that she was, because she was a very empathic, loving person. As we've read some of these stories in here,
Hmm.
and we'll read more, the compassion that she had for her patients, and her strangers that she saw in an airport or whatever. She was definitely at odds with herself, just as you and I are at odds with ourselves. Nothing, we're not different.
Yeah.
So
That's it. That's the important take-home point, I think, for the year and a half that you and I've been reading this, that I find such a resounding um, yes to the idea that Helen's resistance just is a symbol for everyone's resistance, including yours, mine, and whoever we can think of. And yet the brilliance that of Helen's work that came through A Course in Miracles, through her, not from her, but through her, is the same wisdom, the same profundity that came through Ken and anyone else who basically allows themselves to get the personal self out of the way and um, go to the source that is beyond individuality and beyond separation. So, our task is to see that the personal self, which includes both the ego mind and its projection as a body, is not working out for us. and
yeah,
not to get upset with that. It's just realize, okay, there's something more. There's got to be a better way, as Ellen and Bill ask each other. Right?
exactly, exactly. And you said a phrase that I hear a lot of people say, and I say it myself. How's that working out for you? If it's not working out for us,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we know there's a better way. There's
yeah.
yeah, always. So do you want me to read?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah. I have it the same place you have on the right column on your screen.
great.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman, and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. One morning, the three of us were in Helen's office. That's Bill, Helen, and Ken, in an atmosphere filled with the usual tension to which we all had grown very accustomed. I was literally sitting in the middle. By the way, Helen sat in the back of her desk by the window. In back of her desk by the window. I was in my usual seat on the other side of the desk near the door, while Bill sat by the doorway so the smoke from his cigarettes would not enter Helen's office. A typically angry interchange ensued between Helen and Bill, with both of them joining in an equal measure of hostility. They both then turned to me for substantiation of their positions. And I had no option at that moment but to say that both Helen and Bill seemed to be attacking the other. Bill became indignant
Can,
at,
can
indignant
we
at my
pause for a
statement.
moment?
Yes.
I was just going to say, I don't think we can find any examples of conflict or war or hostility in this world, can we?
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that. Have you?
No.
Right. Yeah,
Never.
right.
Mm.
Yeah. But
But
we have so much to work with. That's the good news, right?
exactly, exactly. Yeah, it gives us something to do with our time. So
What was I doing with this life anyway?
I
If not for
know.
forgiveness, right?
Oh my God, I'm so grateful that I am doing this because I'm telling you what, I can't even imagine what I would be right now if I didn't have this
Yeah.
work to
Yeah.
do. If this hadn't have come to me, it had to.
Yeah,
It had
I think
to.
so. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, again, it's there's a line, I think it's in one of the supplements, um, that special agents seem to be ministering to us, but they really give form to our desire. And in this case, I think the course fits into that. I mean, certainly um, Ken's writing and work in anything that we find inspiring. Um, gives form to our Holy Spirit desire, our Jesus desire in our mind, if you will. And anything that basically says, hell no, I won't go, and rebels against the sanity of the Course's message, whatever form it happens to appear in our lives. We all have that part of our mind, and that's the simplicity of it, isn't it? Just to notice those two thought systems, see how we're always choosing one or the other, and that's the habit pattern that we're
Yeah.
learning to make of choosing sanity over insanity. I'm going to be talking about that in the next hour, and also tomorrow morning at the Rocky Mountain Miracle Center.
Oh, nice. Oh,
Yeah,
I love it. I wish I could be there. I just have other obligations, you know how that
sure.
works.
Oh, sure.
But I appreciate it very much that I'm really happy, Bruce. Honestly, I've been seeing. I just saw a new recent video with you with Hakeem Hamza,
Uh-huh.
who I have just fallen in love with him as well.
He's great. Yeah.
And I'm just, I'm so happy. I'm like, that's my friend. Oh my
Well,
gosh. All
yeah,
right.
I try to put a lot of that stuff on acimblog.com and but some of it I've just put links, including that most recent conversation with Hakeem. I put links on the acimblog.com Facebook page. So that's a lot of people. I don't, just because it's a full-time job monitoring Facebook pages, I don't. I have commenting turned off there, so it's just sort of a, go there if you want to see what's there, but I don't have anything that's equivalent to a discussion on that page or anything. So
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm glad. I'll check that out too because I
yeah,
have not joined that page either.
okay, yeah,
So I love it, acimblog.com.
uh-huh.
So yeah, and as far as the commenting and paying attention, I have a Facebook page, ACIM Gather for A Course in Miracles,
Uh-huh.
uh, Facebook page, and I don't look at it at all.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't look at
well, that's one
people
way
commented.
to work it.
Yeah, people are posting. There's all
Yeah,
kinds,
yeah.
but I have admins, kind of, people that have kind of stepped up and said, let me keep an eye on this. And if anybody gets out of line, they operate, take the post down or whatever. But for the most part, people are like really right on, and it's amazing to me. You just, I let it go and it just blooms. So there's there's more people. I don't even know who's on that page anymore, but I do look at it occasionally. So anyway, okay. So Helen and Bill are in a fight, and Ken's sitting in the middle. And he says they both then turn to me for substantiation of their positions. And I had no option at that moment but to say that both Helen and Bill seemed to be attacking the other. They were both insane, right? Bill became indignant at my statement that he was being hostile, as well as Helen, and walked angrily out the doorway and into his adjoining office. Helen turned to me and said, in effect, "Do you see what I'm up against?" Oh, always the ego looking for
And yet
validation.
you'd think that here are two very brilliant psychoanalysts who obviously have studied Freud and know about projection, and they're just full on projecting. And I think that's kind of the case with us after we've studied the course. We it's not like we're not familiar with the idea of projection, but when we catch ourselves and don't forgive ourselves for doing the projection, that we're just basically, digging ourselves deeper. Not that we really can go anywhere with our shovels or backhoes or whatever we're digging ever fast and with whatever, you know, oomph. But we're not helping ourselves when we notice that we're not at peace and then ignore it. And I think it's the looking. I think that's why Ken Wapnick is so brilliant in his work. He comes at it from so many different angles. Say we just have to look, keep looking, 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 and the more that we look, the more that we realize, I could see peace instead of this, and I'm not upset for the reason I think. And the latter being, I could notice that, the problem that I think is out there in this other person that seems to be attacking me, or that I seem to be attacking in quote defense unquote, it's all projection, and it's all in my mind. It's all an internal, an inside job. It's an internal problem.
Yeah, and the whole purpose of just the whole course about looking at your thoughts. Look
Hmm.
at your look what you're thinking. Look at your
Yeah,
thoughts. Look at,
yeah.
and that's again today's lesson. What do I think about myself?
Hmm.
How do I see myself? God doesn't see me the way I see myself. And so, I have to look. And every time the lesson says, anytime, like use this as a replacement basically for
Mhm.
whatever thought you happen to be thinking. So, it really does work if you pay attention to your thoughts, but you have to pay attention to your thoughts.
Right.
So, so yeah, so so we're all doing it. Okay, so Ken continues. I remember once during one of our California trips, see below, speaking directly to Bill about his relationship with Helen. Bill and I, incidentally, were both early morning risers, unlike Helen and Louie, and so spent practically every morning of the month together, waiting for Helen and Louie to awaken and start their day. I referred to Bill's own wonderfully moving story of the healing of a relationship in the early years of the course's transmission, where Bill had made a truly devoted effort to overlook a colleague's hostility. In time, the colleague's attitude toward Bill changed markedly, and they ultimately became and remained good friends. I asked Bill whether he could make the same effort now with Helen, but he retorted almost sharply that the situation was different. I knew then that I should not bring the subject up again. Later in the trip, Bill asked me to join him in confronting Helen about her specialness demands. Excuse me. I refused, not because Helen's demands were not filled with specialness, but because the meeting Bill proposed did not seem loving to me, nor did I think it would be particularly helpful. And I have a feeling that Helen would have been not very happy to be ganged up on by Bill and Ken either. I mean, I know how that would feel if, people came to me and said, I'd like to talk to you about your specialness demands.
Mhm.
I'm like, screw you. And
I was thinking about, yeah, years ago when I lived in Northern California. My wife and I both took a class in arbitration. It just sounded kind of interesting, and we'd been, dabbling with different kinds of metaphysics, and I, was picking up the course now and then, and I never really put it down after I started reading it in the mid '80s, altogether. But one of the things that we did was a couple of weekend workshop with this uh, legal expert whose expertise was in arbitration, and he gave a class that basically would so, certify us to become at least sort of, beginning arbitrators or something like that. And one of the things I was thinking about that it's really about bringing the 2 points of view together, finding the common ground. And I think that's what Ken does in the comment that I already echoed this morning. That's, Ken in so much of his work says, the sameness really is founded on the idea that we all have the same split mind. We all have the same ego and the same Holy Spirit and the same decision maker that chooses between them. And it's the only in bringing the two thought systems together that we begin to see the complete insanity of the ego and the complete sanity of the Holy Spirit. And then the choice is obvious. But as long as we keep them separated, and this corner of the ring is heavyweight champion ego, and in this corner, the other corner, as long as we don't basically say let's talk this over before we put on the gloves and duke it out. Um, but I think that's I'm looking at the 4-line sentence in the rules for decision, which I'm going to go over in an hour. Um, do not fight yourself. If I'm fighting myself, I'm basically saying I don't want to look at the Holy Spirit's point of view. Um, and that's pretty much it, isn't
that,
it?
yeah, that is it. That is it. Do not fight yourself. I don't want to look at the Holy Spirit. And this is honestly, I'm thinking as we're speaking and looking at this, this would be a place where if it had been invented at the time, nonviolent communication would have been really helpful.
Very
And
much, very possibly, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because to be able to just go in without an agenda, without any kind of judgment or that preconceived notion of, what I want and what's going to happen here, and just to go in with and that unconditional positive regard that Carl Rogers taught, that, Bill was also a student of Carl Rogers.
Right,
So
right.
he had to have had some,
Hmm.
some sort of understanding of, how this could actually work. But yeah, I think nonviolent communication would have been very helpful at the time. And
Yeah, I studied that when I lived in Northern California for a little while, for off and on for a few years, and attended a few groups that practiced it. And one of the things I observed, since I was also, getting back into studying the course again, um, was that the emphasis was on behavior and form. Obviously, there was plenty of reminders that it was about the mind, but I can see where it could become a trap where I think, well, I'll just speak the words of being responsible for my own mind, but still harboring the attack thoughts or the blame thoughts. Even though you can speak in I language and me language that doesn't seem to be attacking, but the attack thoughts can still be there, disconnected and disjointed from the behavior, if that makes any sense.
excuse me, it does make sense. And that's uh, a lot of I teach nonviolent communication
Oh, cool.
in connection with the Course in Miracles, and we have
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
a group that we study that on Monday evenings
Oh, okay. Well, so
because
you probably run across this plenty of times then, huh?
oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And it's the thing is, it is looking at your thinking and
Yes, yes.
and uh joining with the other without those preconceived notions, without those prejudgments,
Uh-huh.
just joining with them as we it comes from a point of sameness.
Uh-huh.
So, when we recognize that we all have the same needs, and of course, the only need that we really have, the Course tells us, is for the atonement.
Right.
But the needs that we seem to think we have in the world, that we can connect with each other based on, uh, things that feel very real to us, and and the feelings that we're experiencing because we aren't getting our needs met, and that is uh, something that you really have to learn to look at. And so we look a lot at needs and feelings, um, because not because we believe that those needs and feelings are real or important, but they are real and important to the world, to me as a person. And if I'm not feeling, if I'm not experiencing um, that connection that I really crave with another, the blocks, the obstacles that are keeping me from seeing that really have to be looked at. So, that's why it works for me. I really love nonviolent communication, and I adore Marshall Rosenberg. And he also, like I said, he studied with Carl Rogers,
Uh-huh.
and there's one lecture on there's several lectures where he talks about A Course in Miracles, and how it connects with the nonviolent communication. So I find it very helpful. So anyway, that's my pitch for NBC.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot, a
And
lot of, lot of good insights in it. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it is a wonderful, because it's a practice, and it's a
Hmm.
practice that really is forgiveness
Yeah.
in its essence.
Yeah,
Uh,
and anything that helps with mindfulness and just noticing, when you're about to, kind of like the whole count to 10 thing, when you're upset by anything, just say, okay, what's going to be the outcome of me lashing out at or being critical of, or even passive aggressive snide remark, can be a whole gamut of things to at the other end of the spectrum, out and out nuclear warfare, kind of thing. But um, looking at our mind, anything that helps us to do that without condemning ourselves, I think can be helpful, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And anything that brings us together,
Yes.
joins us together,
Yeah.
out of fear and judgment. is always going to be helpful.
Hmm.
That it's always going to be helpful. So, this is, that's why I'm such a big advocate of it. I love it. So, so do
Shall I
you
go on?
want to lead on?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Bill was thus never able personally to accept the Course's teaching that our problems rested in the decision we made to seek for grievance in others in order to avoid responsibility for our own wish to be separate and therefore unhappy. As Jesus explained in the Course at one point, anger always involves projection of separation, which must be accepted as one's own responsibility rather than being blamed on others. Well, there we go. We're just talking about that at some length. Yep. And that's from text chapter 6, the introduction. Therefore, peace can never come until people change their minds from desiring conflict. Well, there, and I think that's a really key insight is that, it uh, our blame machine and projection machine, we're constantly looking for scapegoats so that we can maintain our separate selves, thinking that that's buying us because we desire the conflict. We go after it. The old cliche of is this a private fight or can anyone join is the ego, one of the ego's mantras, right?
Exactly. And these are you know Jesus talk to us is our attraction to guilt,
Hmm.
our attraction to death. The ego is attracted to these things,
Right.
and that's why we look at them. That's why, if I, really want to get excited, all I have to do is turn on the news. And, my attraction to uh, all of the the foibles of the ego is
Hmm.
very evident. I take sides. I get excited. I get afraid. Um, all of these things because that's how the ego maintains its connection to me. That's how the ego keeps control is that I keep wanting to see the bad things. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the course doesn't suggest that we just cold turkey stop those behaviors, although in some cases, if they're really destructive, that might be a good idea. But it does suggest that as we're looking at our mind, just notice how we feel, and then and just kind of tally it up. And it's like if everything that the ego suggests in its propaganda machine that spews forth misinformation, much like a media outlet that isn't particularly fact-based. Holy Spirit is our fact checker here. If we just kind of notice, what works and what doesn't, we start to develop a pattern of noticing that the ego's, um, you know, prompting to get upset about every little thing hasn't made us happy. And
Yeah.
imagine that.
Imagine that. That my looking at everything that's wrong with the world is not making me happy. What?
Yep, exactly. So let me start that paragraph over again.
Okay.
Therefore, well, actually, well, finish that paragraph again. Therefore, peace can never come until people change their minds from desiring conflict, realizing peace is all they truly want. This is the meaning of the Course's basis message of forgiveness, originally meant for Helen and Bill. Helen, who was fully aware of her anger, could or would not let go of her grievances against Bill. Over and over, she and I would discuss them. I even wrote little forgiveness poems for her and prayers for her to say to Jesus, asking his help to forgive. I also very often prayed with Helen, asking Jesus in her name for help in looking at Bill differently. Thus, despite the awareness of her own hostility and the her her position held vis-a-vis the course, her understanding was to no avail. It was almost as if Helen intuitively knew she could or would, in parentheses, not release these defenses, and she rested content with this awareness. One incident above all others is indelibly impressed on my memory. It did not specifically involve Bill, but the incident nonetheless illustrates Helen's need for her anger against Bill or anyone else. It was a rainy Saturday, and Helen and I were not able to go out as we usually did. This particular afternoon, Helen was incensed at someone whom in general she did not like, but this time more than usual. Her anger went on, and nothing I could say or do convinced her to let it go. As the day wore on, in fact, the rage seemed to increase. But finally, after dinner, Helen's fury abated enough to allow me to suggest a possible solution. I borrowed the imagery of Helen's experience with Jesus in the Elohim vision and asked her to imagine herself kneeling before the altar with Jesus on one side and this person on the other side. She reluctantly agreed and eventually was able to allow Jesus' presence to evaporate the anger, and she felt peaceful once again. I left for home shortly thereafter. The following day, when I came over, Helen greeted me at the door with an icy rage I did not often see in her, and certainly hardly ever directed at me. Quote, "Don't you ever do that again, to me again," unquote, she said sharply. I had no idea what Helen meant, but she promptly explained that after having gone to bed peacefully, she awakened in the middle of the night in a fury that almost equaled her London experience many years earlier. If that object of her unforgiveness had been available, she might have literally torn him limb from limb. Her rage was so all-consuming that she was unable to fall back asleep and was still experiencing the effects of that forgiveness exercise. I assured her I would never, quote, do that to her again, unquote. It was clear that Helen's anger was needed to, quote, protect, unquote, her ego from the peace of God that was still so threatening, and I grew to respect that need in her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I've done that myself, and this is what I'm wondering, is how, because this is obviously Ken's lesson as well.
Oh,
So,
sure, yeah. To the degree
there,
that he was flustered or you know upset in any way by it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and so the whole idea, like I said, I've done this before too, because I'm so angry or I feel like I'm so right and someone else is so wrong that I have to hold them accountable or I have to do something to make it right. And then, the Holy Spirit will come and say, Lynn, this is, don't hurt yourself and don't hurt, you're not doing anything to them.
Hmm.
Don't get yourself all worked up about this and, let it go. And, me saying, no, I can't, I don't want to let it go. In fact, we have a guy, Rafi, who's in a lot of our groups, and he does the Lester Levinson's work, the Sedona method, that whole thing. And his whole question is always, can you let it go? Is it a need for control or approval or what is it what is it that you're trying to do and can you let that go? And so many times the answer is no. I can't, I don't want to let it go. But letting it go, really, really letting it go, like Byron Katie's work does, helping you to let it go. Really letting it go is healing, but letting it go when you want to hold on to it and you think that anger is justified, it is it's a pain. And it does bring up a lot. If your ego is really intent on being disruptive to the process, the piece, it's going to come back and bite you, and you're going to wake
Hmm.
up in the middle of the night and be pissed. And you're going to lash out at the person that brought the idea to you. Don't you ever do that to me again. That, wow. But she had to know. She had to know, and that's the other thing. When you know that you're doing it yourself,
Hmm.
then the only thing you can do is blame yourself if you want to hold on to the grievance, and that's going to even make you crazier.
Yeah,
It's only
yeah,
when you're able to really say, I don't want this anymore,
exactly.
that
Like you
it
say,
can go.
when you let go. I was thinking about as you were sharing that, the line in what is forgiveness, and here's an example of, again, that the split mind that Helen represented for all of us. Um, in this particular instance, she was upset with someone, evidently not Bill, but someone else, and was in a rage, which is an unforgiving thought, if you will. And so the same mind, the other side of Helen's mind penned this in her shorthand, of course. An unforgiving thought is one which makes a judgment that it will not raise to doubt, although it is not true. The mind is closed and will not be released. The thought protects projection, tightening its change so that distortions are more veiled and more obscure, less easily accessible to doubt, and further kept from reason. What can come between a fixed projection and the aim that it has chosen as its wanted goal? And that, of course, is paragraph 2 from the first of the 14 what is in the second part of the workbook. What is forgiveness? Which I think is such a helpful reminder. When I lived in Southern Oregon, a lovely lady, Beverly Beck, who facilitated this study group on Tuesday evenings, would always have us read those 5 paragraphs every evening, every Tuesday evening, and a, a great choice because
Hmm.
because if we can look at, how we don't want to forgive, that basically exposes the ego's propaganda machine. It's insane lies about everything.
Yeah, and you have to, eventually what happens is that you you either accept it and recognize it and decide, or you continue to fight it. But if you continue to fight it, it will continue to hurt you. And it's like pounding your head against the wall. It will hurt you as long as you keep doing it.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
letting it go is such a relief.
Mhm.
And if you only knew, I know he says this, if you only knew, what kind of relief would come to you if you actually did this, you would beg for it. You would run to it.
If we
But
met everyone without condemnation, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and that's again comes up to, why am I not doing that? Oh, well, the very simple question, would I rather be right or happy? And, if I think that, I'm going to be right and they're going to be wrong, then I can hold on to that as long as I want, but I will never be happy. And so, you have to, choose one.
Mhm.
Which do you want? Anyway,
Yep.
yeah, you want to continue reading?
Uh, sure. I'm going to back up a couple of sentences. I assured her that I would never, quote, do that to her again, unquote. It was clear that Helen's anger was needed to, quote, protect, unquote, her ego from the peace of God that was still so threatening. And I grew to respect that need in her. Well, there's protecting the projection that the unforgiving thought does. All of our ego defenses protect projection and keep us firmly anchored as a dream figure instead of a dreamer. And Holy Spirit just says, I can take you through both of those shields of oblivion from the horrific uh, incarceration of thinking that you're a body and nothing else to thinking, well, okay, now maybe you're a mind that's projecting a body, but it's a schizophrenic, uh, sinful, fearful, guilty mind. And and going through that incorrect assessment of oneself to the decision maker, that's where on the other side of that is a an awareness that undoes that, but simply by looking without condemnation. Yeah. Okay, so respect for Helen's ego was a lesson difficult for many to learn, for the temptation was always great in those who knew Helen to try to change her, to quote, save, unquote, her from her own ego. I remember that in the last year or two of Helen's life, some of her well-intentioned course friends pressured her into going to California in an attempt to shake her out of her state of depression and withdrawal. They insisted she make the trip, made someone available to take care of her, and even placed her in a car sitting in front of the steering wheel she had not driven for quite a while. Thus, the attempt was made to change her mind by forcing changes in her behavioral patterns. Well, that was the kind of minor comment that I was touching on earlier about, one can use NVC or in any other system incorrectly, including, of course, the course, by letting ego getting a hold of it and using it for its ends, right? So it's like, sure, I'll do the form without changing the content. Yeah, right. Well, okay, we've seen how well that works, right? And here's this example. Thus, the attempt was to change her mind by forcing changes in her behavioral patterns. This imposition of external changes on a person inadvertently depreciates the power of the mind that could choose differently, the only power that could truly help anyone. Helen made the trip with Louis. I was not able to go. And while she survived the good intentions, her ego also survived very well the attempts to save her. Oh, Ken has a
See,
way with
duh.
words. Her ego survived also very well. Uh,
Um,
that's funny. Do you want to go on from there?
Sure. And I think that's hilarious that, again, we think if we can change the form, if we
Hmm.
can, we can get you to drive a car,
Right. Yeah.
it's gonna cause a shift in you. And of course, I know that they were well-wishing, but completely oblivious to the mechanism that was operating on her.
Hmm.
Um, and I really have to watch that myself, not to insist that people change behaviors, and thinking that that's going to help them be happier or a better person or whatever,
Yeah.
because first off, I don't know. And assuming that I know this is what's going to change or help you is really arrogant. And of course the ego loves that. I have a prescription for you, and it's do something different in the world and you'll feel better. And so we all have it going on. All
Yep.
right, so let's see, were you going to say something?
Nope. Nope.
Okay. So, while there was no question that Helen's judgmental attitude and phobic concerns brought her no peace, that state was preferable to her, to the love that lay behind her defenses. And this again, what he's pointing out here is that she was so she had such a deep attraction for love, such a deep attraction for God, that she was in a intense battle with herself over her own uh, what I would call it agency. That she really wanted to be in control, and so she knew, but she was just fighting herself all the time over letting the Holy Spirit be in control or letting the ego be in control. And if such a strong ego has to have a really strong adversary. So she had that tremendous attraction to God that was overwhelming to her, and her ego had to do that in order to try to maintain its independence. So okay, so while there was no question that Helen's judgmental attitude and phobic concerns brought her no peace, that state was preferable to her to the love that lay behind her defenses. I remember early in our relationship, Helen quoting to me lines from Yeats, quote, "Tread lightly on my dreams. They are dreams, yet they are my dreams," end quote. I never forgot that lesson, and later I shall discuss in more depth how Jesus treated Helen as well in this regard. Love is strong when it allows the beloved to be weak in the presence of the mind's denial of its own strength. The strength of love, as the Course says, of the Holy Spirit, um, does not demand, command, or seek control. In its gentleness, it simply reminds the mind of the strength of Christ it both has and is. Thus, it reinforces the mind's power to choose again whenever it so desires, knowing that the outcome of truth is certain. This is the ultimate meaning of patience, one of the 10 characteristics of God's teachers that is discussed in the Manual for Teachers. So, yeah, during Helen's later years, I seemed to be increasingly in the role of her therapist as she trusted me more than any other. Yet it had become clear to me after the first couple of years of our relationship that Helen would not change her mindset, nor did she have to. My role thus became more and more a supportive and comforting one, and my love for her expressed itself in allowing her to choose as she did, in deep respect for the greater wisdom that I knew was the source of her life here, despite the ego side of her experience. And what a kind thing that is for Ken
Hmm.
to have done that, to have overlooked really the manic ego operation in Helen, and just to look to the love that she was,
Yeah.
and not to pay attention to it. And honestly, why pay attention to what? It's nothing. Why do
Hmm.
we get upset when other people are acting erratically and egoically? It's
Right.
nothing. It doesn't reflect the truth of what they are. It
Right.
only reflects a blip in time that has no real meaning. So, what is the truth? The truth is you are the Holy Son of God. You may be acting like a jerk right now, but
Hmm.
still you are the Holy Son of God. And I can't hold that. I can't hold it against you. Make not of love an enemy. I can't hold it against you. I have to let you be what you are. That's such a beautiful passage in the course. Let him be as he is. Anyway, did you have something you wanted to say?
Um, yeah, I think I might have derailed my thought. But um, keep going, and I'll remember it probably. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, sorry about that.
Oh,
So,
no problem.
all right. So, let's go on. And so, loving both Ken and Bill, I grew to accept the unhealed nature of their relationship. My attempts to help them shift along the lines set forth in A Course in Miracles, given, after all, to help induce such a shift, evolved into gentle reminders. While my
I
person,
did remember what I was going to
okay,
say now.
good. Let's hear
Yeah,
it.
I was just thinking that when we are truly forgiving, we're basically ignoring the ephemeral in what we've projected out, which is anyone else that seems to cross our path physically or in our mind. Um, and we're basically saying, I'd rather look to the eternal aspect of you. What doesn't change in you, and what doesn't change is the same. What seems to change is what's different. So on the level of the form of our dreams of space and time, the course kind of looks at it as like, okay, you're in this little sandbox, this cosmic sandbox, and you got all these kids and all these little Tonka toys and army men and whatnot, and and playing whatever games you're playing with all these little trinkets and whatnot. And at some point, someone says, "Well, I want what you have," and then you have these wars, and you end up kicking sand in each other's face and all that sort of thing. And Holy Spirit is like this uh, infinitely tall, gentle, forgiving presence that might feel a grain of sand or two, at the bottom of its feet, but is not affected by however raucous the toddler sandbox tantrum is, and just laughs and just says, you'll tire of this. Just trust me. You'll want to leave the sandbox, leave the desert, leave the
Yeah,
desert. The desert's just a bigger sandbox, right? And
that's it's a big, big sandbox.
mhm. And it's the desert of the mind. It's not a physical desert, which I remind myself since I moved to the desert a year and a half ago,
It
from the
is.
very lush Oregon coastal zone in the
I
dream of
know
space-time. Yeah.
that had to be hard. I'm
Well,
sorry.
actually, there's pluses and minuses. I mean, um, you know, anyway, just like any other place in the dream, there's pluses and minuses, right?
Exactly. And as much as I love the lush Oregon coastal area, and I love the places where there's lots of, rain and humidity and all that, I don't like mold. I don't like, I mean, there's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, oh yeah, oh absolutely, yeah, yeah. And when the first day of summer hits, I noticed that for several years where there's like, wow, the temperature shot all the way up to 80, and it's like, whew, 10, 15 degrees above normal, and it's like, wow, bring out the short sleeve shirts, wow, whoo, whoo,
Yeah.
whoo, and then usually within a day or two, it's like back to the cool, overcast, drizzle, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
With,
Which
with
is
with occasional
wonderful.
bursts of sun, of course, but yeah.
Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah, but it's all pluses and minuses in the dream. So I'll,
Exactly.
I'll long for that this summer, I'm sure, at
I'm
various times.
sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
We always long for what we don't have, because
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we don't have it, you know, we're longing for it.
Yep.
Longing for the fjords.
Yeah.
Okay,
Pining for the fjords.
pining for the fjords.
All right. Well,
Sorry.
let's see. Can we? Uh, this might be a good place to stop because I really do
Yeah.
need. Since I'm facilitating a group in about 5 minutes. I probably
Yeah,
should just
okay,
draw a
that's
line
good.
here and and
We
I'll,
will, and we'll just start back here next week. Oh,
that
and you
sounds
know
good.
what I was going to say, Bruce?
Yeah.
If you can only be here for less than half an hour next week, why don't we just postpone it? I'll play a recording or
Oh,
something,
okay. Okay.
because that's hardly time for us to even get talking. You know?
Uh, yeah, that's true. A lot of times we spend the first better part of the first half hour just getting warmed up, huh? Yeah.
Yep,
Which is good.
exactly.
Which is
So
good.
yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, so take a break next week,
Sounds good.
and
And
we'll
and uh, and that'll be the first uh, daylight savings time travel thing that most of the country does. So
yeah.
it'll seem an hour earlier.
Oh man, which is really earlier for us. And I just just wanted to point that out to folks who are listening as well. Remember this, in the US next week, we will be 1 hour earlier than we are now, because we'll have it'll still say the same time on the clock, but but my body, who's trying to sleep, will be saying, well, this is too early for me. But
And those of us who
anyway,
are in Arizona and Alaska have that have online events.
oh
Almost
no.
all of mine are online, so I changed about 30 different events that I do. 20 or 30, I don't know how many it is, but a bunch over to daylight savings time. So
Wow, yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
I forgot about that. You don't
Oh yeah.
have, wow. All right.
So we'll just watch all the time travelers that do their thing
That's
next
right.
in a couple of days, or actually late tonight, early tomorrow
Yeah,
morning. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
Tonight,
All right.
tomorrow, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. Well,
After
thank you as
midnight.
always, Lynn. I always enjoy our conversations on Saturday mornings and look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Bruce. I love you so much, brother, and I'm so grateful
Likewise.
for you.
Likewise.